'Tis midsummer. Somewhere on the North Atlantic, a Viking longship is 3 days out from Iceland, running west toward Greenland. No land visible in any direction. The navigator, the man responsible for getting 30 people across 800 miles of open ocean to a specific fjord, has a problem. Not the weather, not the waves, not the wind direction. A time problem. Specifically, he needs to know what time it is, not approximately, precisely. Because his navigation system depends on knowing the sun's position relative to the horizon at specific times of day. The shadow of his bearing dial needs to fall at a specific length, at a specific angle, at a specific time. If he does not know what time it is, he cannot take the reading. If he cannot confirm his latitude, he is navigating by memory, which works until it doesn't. He has no mechanical clock. No clock will exist anywhere in the world for another 300 years. He has no printed calendar, no standardized time system, no way to communicate time using any number smaller than the width of a season. And he is about to do something that should be impossible. He is going to tell you exactly what time it is, within minutes, using nothing but a carved piece of wood, a shadow, and a system of time measurement refined for 300 years. Developed in the darkest, most seasonally extreme environment in the inhabited world. Before mechanical clocks, time was not a number. It was a quality, a relationship between the position of the sun and the activities appropriate to that position. The modern conception of time, precise, universal, coordinated across populations, did not exist. What existed instead was local time, relative time. Time defined by the observable position of the sun and social agreements about what that position meant. In most medieval European cultures, the day was divided by the church into canonical hours. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. 8 divisions of the day anchored to the sun's position. Not equal divisions. The hours were defined by the liturgical schedule rather than by equal portions of the day. The Norse had their own system, a system built not on religious obligation, but on practical necessity, on the specific demands of agricultural life where the sun's behavior was extreme, constant in summer, absent in winter. A time system tied too closely to the sun's daily arc would be useless for half the year. The Norse developed a time system that worked in darkness, tracking the sun's annual position, by the changing quality of the light, by the length of shadows, by the direction of wind and the behavior of animals that responded to seasonal change as biological clocks, segments carefully calibrated to the specific agricultural and navigational demands of Norse life. Modern historians studying the Old Norse time vocabulary have been consistently struck by its precision. The Old Norse year had 2 seasons, not 4, 2. Sumar, summer, vetur, winter. These were not loose cultural categories. They were precisely defined. Summer began on the Thursday between the 14th and 21st of April in the modern calendar. Winter began on the Saturday between the 11th and 18th of October. The specific days were determined not arbitrarily, but by the agricultural calendar, by the last reliable date for livestock to be sent to summer pasture, and the last reliable date for livestock to be brought back before winter conditions made outdoor grazing dangerous. The seasons were defined by what they required, not by what the sun was doing abstractly, by what the sun's behavior meant for survival. Within the 2 seasons, the Norse divided time further. The day, from modern midnight to modern midnight, was divided into 8 parts, not equal parts, functionally defined parts. Midneti, midnight. The dead center of the night. Otta, the period before dawn, the time of cold and darkness before first light. Morgen, morning, from first light to mid-morning. Hadagi, high day, the sun at its highest point. Midday, middagar, midday, the period around solar noon. Non, mid-afternoon, the time of declining sun. Midderaptan, mid-evening, late afternoon. Nattmal, night meal time. The evening when the day's main meal was eaten, 8 divisions, each one defined not by an abstract equal portion of the day, but by the specific quality of light and the specific activities appropriate to that quality. This system worked across seasons. In winter, when the sun barely rose, the definitions shifted with the light. Hadagi, high day, was not noon in the mechanical clock sense. It was when the sun reached its highest point, even if that highest point was barely above the horizon. The divisions were anchored to the sun's behavior, whatever that behavior was on a given day in a given season, which meant they worked in Iceland in December, when the sun provided 4 hours of pale light, and they worked in Norway in June when the sun circled the horizon for 22 hours. The same system, calibrated differently by the season, but always readable, always sufficient for the coordination that Norse agricultural and social life required. The bearing dial. In 1948, an archaeologist named C.L. Webeck was excavating a Norse site at Unartok in Greenland. He found a fragment, a piece of carved wood, roughly semicircular, approximately 7 centimeters across. It had notches cut around its curved edge at irregular intervals, and a hole in its center. Webeck photographed it, cataloged it, filed it, and did not know what it was. For 50 years, the fragment sat in the archaeological record, classified as an unknown object. Then, in 2000, researchers began applying astronomical analysis to the problem. They asked, if this fragment is part of a circular disk used for solar navigation, what would the complete disk have looked like? And what notch positions would produce accurate latitude readings at specific Norse locations? The answer required sophisticated astronomical modeling. The notch positions on the Unartok fragment, when extrapolated to a complete circle and analyzed against the sun's behavior, at known Norse navigation latitudes produced something extraordinary. A device that, when held horizontally with a vertical pin in the central hole, produced shadow positions that gave accurate latitude readings at the latitudes of the major Norse Atlantic crossing routes. Not approximate readings, accurate ones, within approximately half a degree of latitude. A half degree of latitude is approximately 30 miles. On an 800-mile crossing from Iceland to Greenland, a navigational error of 30 miles is manageable. The Norse navigator holding his bearing dial at sea was not making rough estimates. He was doing navigation, precise instrument-based navigation, with a piece of carved wood. But the bearing dial solved the latitude problem. It did not solve the time problem. For time, the Norse used a different technique, the shadow stick, a vertical stick of known height, planted in level ground. The length and direction of its shadow at any given moment communicates both the time of day and the sun's seasonal position. Norse farmers used shadow sticks to schedule the agricultural day with enough precision to coordinate activities across a farmstead. Norse navigators used a version of the same technique to track elapsed time at sea, monitoring the changing shadow of the ship's mast, to confirm that the expected amount of time had passed since the last reliable observation. Not a clock, a relative time tracker. Combined with the environmental time indicators, the Norse had trained themselves to read the quality of the light, the behavior of seabirds, the temperature change across the day, the specific appearance of the sky. The shadow stick gave the navigator enough temporal precision. The annual calendar was maintained through a different system, the primstav, a carved wooden calendar stick that marked the important dates of the Norse year through a system of runic symbols and specific carved marks. Not a written calendar, a physical one, a stick you could hold in your hand. That encoded the entire agricultural year in a sequence of marks that any trained person could read. When to plant, when to harvest, when to move livestock, when to expect specific weather patterns, when the days would begin lengthening, when the light would return. The agricultural knowledge of generations carved into a portable object, passed from farm to farm, updated, corrected, refined, by the people whose survival depended on its accuracy. The primstav tradition survived in Scandinavia into the 19th century, long past the introduction of printed calendars, because the farmers who used it knew it worked, better in some ways for their specific needs than the printed alternative, because it encoded local knowledge, not abstract universal time, but the specific behavior of the specific land they farmed, the specific weather patterns of their specific valley, the specific dates on which their specific animals needed to be moved, knowledge that no printed calendar could carry, because it belonged to a place, and the primstav belonged to the people of that place who had carved it from what they knew. Here is what the Norse time system could not manage: the horizon, not the physical horizon at sea, the calendar horizon, the moment when the accumulated precision of the Norse time system ran into the fundamental imprecision of a lunar solar calendar. The Norse calendar drifted. All pre-modern calendars drift. The solar year is not an exact number of days. It is 365 days, 5 hours, 48 minutes, and 46 seconds. The fraction that does not fit into a whole day accumulates. Over decades, over centuries, the calendar falls further behind the actual solar year. By approximately 1 day every 128 years, a drift that is invisible in a single lifetime. That becomes obvious across generations. The Norse managed this through periodic corrections, observations of the solstices and equinoxes. But the management was imperfect, local, not coordinated across the Norse world, different communities correcting at different times, by different amounts for different reasons. The result was a Norse world in which the calendar was never quite the same in Iceland as it was in Norway. Small differences, enough to cause confusion in trade, enough to create disagreements about when specific legal obligations fell due, enough to matter in a world where the legal and agricultural calendar was the primary coordination mechanism for community life. The Norse time system was brilliant for the purposes it was designed for. Agricultural scheduling, sea navigation. It was not designed for coordination across large, geographically dispersed populations. When the Norse world expanded, when trade networks connected communities from Iceland to Byzantium, the calendar fragmentation became a real problem. Because the Norse knowledge system, built on local observation and memory, did not have a mechanism for universal standardization. The local precision and the universal coordination were in tension. They never fully resolved. In 2013, a team of researchers at the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen published a paper on the Unartok bearing dial fragment. They had been running computational simulations, testing the accuracy of the reconstructed device across the range of latitudes, seasons, and times of day. The results confirmed what the 2000 analysis had suggested, and added something new. The device worked best under conditions of overcast sky, not under clear sky conditions. Overcast, when the sun was obscured. The device used the polarization pattern of skylight, the same physical phenomenon that the Iceland spar sunstone exploited, to locate the sun's position. Two different devices, two different working principles, both exploiting the same atmospheric physics, both capable of determining the sun's position when invisible. The Norse navigator on a cloudy North Atlantic had two independent methods for locating the sun through clouds: the sunstone for direction, the bearing dial for time and latitude, both built from materials available anywhere in the Norse world, both operable without specialized knowledge of the physics they were exploiting, and more accurate under specific North Atlantic conditions than many later instruments, because they were built for those specific conditions, not for ideal clear sky conditions, for clouds and fog and the challenges of the 9th century. The people who built these devices did not know about atmospheric polarization. They knew that holding the crystal a certain way told them the position. They knew that the shadow on the carved wooden disc at a specific position on the notches told them their latitude. They knew because it worked. Think about the Norse navigator on his long ship 3 days out from Iceland, standing on a pitching deck in a cold west wind, clouds above him from horizon to horizon, no sun visible anywhere, holding his bearing dial out at arm's length, reading a shadow that should not be there under a sun he cannot see, knowing where he is, knowing what time it is, knowing which way to sail. 300 years before mechanical clocks existed, 800 years before the physics was formally described, on a piece of carved wood the size of a dinner plate. The ocean around him did not know he had no clock. The ocean does not care what you have. It only cares whether you can read it. He could, because someone had paid attention and built something from what they noticed, and passed it on. And the passing on was the technology. The real technology was the chain of people, each one watching the shadow fall, each one learning from the one before. All the way back to the first person who noticed that a shadow on a carved disc could tell you where you were on the largest ocean. And forward, all the way forward, to the researcher in Copenhagen in 2013, running simulations on a fragment of carved wood, still learning from the shadow,